Okay, so today we're going to be using the grid technique to map out our portrait. So I've wet down everywhere except the highlights. I'm going to use a very simple palette today, starting with burnt umber and then building into burnt sienna and yellow ochre. So you'll have tested out your color swatches earlier to find a combination of colors that works best for you. And then starting with the darkest colors, I'm just going to use my photograph that I've turned into a black and white reference, so you can do that on your phone, and come into the darkest areas. I find getting rid of the color in the photograph can be a useful way of just seeing light and dark values, because the thing is the eye is more attuned to light and dark than it is to color. So there is a lot of wiggle room in terms of the color that you paint your portrait. You can make a very realistic portrait in blue. The thing that we tend to see as fake quite quickly, though, is differences in tone. So by focusing on just light and dark, I'm already, making way towards making more realistic painting. Just gonna come in here. You'll notice that some colors get used up a lot more quickly than others, like the burnt umber, for instance. I'm running through it quite quickly because it isn't particularly highly pigmented, and that's just the way that paints are. Some are going to be stronger than others, depends on the brand, depends on the pigment you're using. So don't be alarmed if you find yourself running through one paint or another. You can always get more. So let me get that. And you want to use the largest brush for the job. So I'm just switching to a larger malt brush. And I'm just using this burnt sienna to get all the shadows. Now I'm going to start glazing in some burnt sienna. So I'm just mixing that. You can either mix it with your previous color, you can use previous color of your choosing. I still haven't switched back to color on my photograph. I'm just going to use lighter colors closer to this side of the face, which is catching more light. But other than that, I'm keeping things really simple, and I'm not trying to match the actual colors in the reference too exactly. I'm more focused on tone. And your Asaro head is a super useful tool in this. So you can adjust it so that you have the same light coming across the Asaro head as you have in your photograph turned to black and white. And that can be really useful in just showing you where the different planes of the face are. And this first layer is very watery. I'm just using water on wet paper, and you have to be careful you don't oversaturate the paper. Just going to drop in a little yellow ochre near the highlights, but then I'm going to need to dry the paper. All right, so now that I've got the soft details, I'm just going to dry my paper before coming in with deeper details. So I'm just going to go back to the photo, and now I'm going to just use the color photo. Let's find that. Right. So I'll start coming in with some cooler tones around the eyes. I'm going to use the ultramarine blue. I can also use this to deepen up the color of the eyebrows. Oops, too dark. And the whites of the eyes are going to be, I'm going to use Prussian blue for that. And then I need to darken up the above eyebrow areas, which I'll do with a little bit of Prussian blue and burnt umber. A little bit more ultramarine. Let me find that. I'm going to use this for the cool shadow from my hair as well. A little bit of shadows under the eyes. There's going to be shadows under the nose, so I'm just going to start that with the blue. I'm using a mix of ultramarine and Prussian blue. This base layer, one is warm, one's cool, and they just work with different areas where the light's hitting. Base of the nose, I'm quickly going to come in with some crimson. A little bit of vermilion across the nose. Purple between the eyes, kind of here. I'm going to use some of that blue for shadows on the side of the face. Then add a little bit more red as I come towards the front of the face. Now I have to be careful because I'm darkening up everything a little bit too much, so I'm just going to come in, lift some of this out, soften that up a bit, work back in some light values because this is getting a little bit muddy. Now I know that my darkest color here is going to be the phthalo blue, so I'm just going to add some of that to my burnt umber to create my darkest value. I'm not really concerned whether it matches the color. I'm more concerned with whether it matches the value, and I'm going to use that in a few areas for my hair. Usually there's like a little bit of red on the top of the ear, so I'm just gonna get that in. You're just working across the page as you go along. I'm gonna just make sure that some of this red in the lips is reflected in the nose. Usually there's like a really nice interplay in between the nose and the lips, where the base of the nose is going to pick up a little bit of color from the lips. Just adding in some more reddish tones. And then you want to wait for your paper to be really dry before you put in details like the eyes. So I'm just going to get the hairdryer, dry this for a second. in a little bit of eye color. As that dries, I'm going to occupy myself elsewhere on the page. So just getting those eyes, same general sort of height. Maybe a little bit darker on the top where there's a shadow from the upper eyelid. You always want to think about like where you can put the color you're using. So since I have a little bit of ultramarine on my brush, I'm going to use that just for the space in between the lips. And often the color, like where the lips meet, is a little bit more vibrant, a little bit warmer, so I'm just going to put some vermilion there. And then it's kind of cooler on the lower lip, so it's some alizarin crimson, which is the cooler of the colors. Just defining the eyes a little bit. And the eyebrows. A little bit at the base of the nose. And in the inner corners of the eyes, there's going to be a tiny bit of red, so I'm just going to put some color there. Okay, and I need this to dry now, so I'm just going to move to the background. I'm going to make a kind of grayed, cooled yellow, so Prussian blue and some yellow ochre. And to make this really kind of watercolory, you can wet down the background first. Actually, some ultramarine blue would look nice, so I might do ultramarine blue instead. red in the ear. Some cooler blues on this side of the face. And you can either leave your portrait like that, or because we're doing line and wash, you can do the line and wash. So let me just dry this and get my pen out. Right, so returners to the class may want to continue at this point just with watercolors, just making finer and finer details on dry paper. And beginners will have pens available to make this a line and wash portrait. So basically the pen is going to add some nice contrast to the portrait. And we're just going over the very darkest details, like the sides of the nose, the upper eyelid. You might want to refer back to your grid for this. And the pupils, so let's get those. It's amazing what a little bit of contrast really does to bring out a portrait. And of course it kind of switches to a more illustrative style when you use the line and wash technique, but there are lots of choices in watercolors that you can, lots of different techniques that you can use. Okay, and there we have it, today's beginner's self-portrait. So thank you for watching, thank you for attending the class, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Thanks, bye.